So I've been doing a bit of work on lots of scripts around voice attack, voice command, and basically trying to make things happen just using your voice, which I find really interesting and quite challenging. And what I've realised is that a lot of the scripting that is needed for that to happen revolves around the management of keyDown event handlers, which has caused me a huge amount of headache because I'm not brilliant at coding, and it took me a while to figure out how to combine Boolean states with key handlers. So I'm going to try and talk you through this, and I'm also going to try and talk myself through this when I come back to this video in a few months' time to try and remember how the hell I did all of this stuff, because my memory is terrible. So I've now built two systems that do two specific things. So the first one, voice activated cold finder, VACF, needs new name. But what VACF does is it allows you to look through binoculars or even just through visuals using sort of estimation and a compass possibly, but it takes your position, it takes your heading that you're looking at, it takes a distance, and then it calculates the grid coordinate based on those parameters, and it does all of that using voice. So there's no map clicks, no looking at the map. This is all quite sort of hopefully quite sort of dynamic and immersive. And then the other system that I built a while ago and I've just come back to is the voice activated RT, which is a similar process which allows you to call in different types of artillery strikes, again just using a voice. And the way that works is that there are different stages of questioning that you have to go through in order to complete the process, and if you answer all the questions, explosions happen. So what I was going to do is talk you through how the RT system works, but actually having finished the cold finder today, I thought it might be simpler to walk you through the process of the cold finder, because there's fewer questions but the principle is the same. So the VAA is just a sort of a busier version of the VACF. So you may probably not have seen the other video about all of this stuff, but what this stuff here is kind of like an ambient mission that just kind of happens in the background and gives you something to do. It gives me something to do while I'm testing all of this voice stuff. So just in case you're interested, I'm using Visual Studio Code, which is just awesome, absolutely awesome bit of kit, great IDE, loads of plugins, also lots of really nice GitHub functionality, so you can just sort of quite effortlessly just push that up to any repository that you've got. Anyway, VACF. So these files here are what makes all of that work. So the path or the flow for the mission is simply just to call this line on mission start, and I think I mentioned in the last video the reason I do that is in case any of this was going to be turned into a mod, it's useful to have the kind of the sudo init file outside of the init file, because the init SQF is a mission based thing, and you probably want some kind of, I think it's a config CPP type deal for mod making, but I'm not going into that now. But all you need to know is that there's a file here that triggers this on startup, and that is this, and don't need any of that. And all this does is this acts as the sort of the real initiator for the script. So it's a bit convoluted, but pretty low tax in terms of performance, I hope. So that triggers this initialize VACF, which is this. So in the initialize VACF file, you've got a one-off announcement, sort of debuggy type, this is working, and then what I do here is I announce, or declare rather, the arrays and the Boolean states for everything that's going to happen next. Okay, so I'm only using 3 arrays here. There's the voice activated coordinate finder heading, distance, and another one that kind of brings it all together. So we need to do some kind of combining of the data, and in the end we get one array, which is the confirmed chords, which is the stuff that currently is shown as a system chat, but eventually will be hopefully something a bit nicer, like a display or something like that. Then we've got our bool states, and I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but this is the only way that I could figure out how to make it work. So the way this works is that you only have a number of keys to play with. Okay, so we're playing with 10 keys plus an initiation key, so 11 keys in total, which is quite a big tax for ArmA, I think, because keyboards are limited and keys are limited, and I'm just trying to make it work at the moment. There's potentially ways that we could put key modifiers in to reduce the number of keys in total, but for now we're just going to keep it very simple and have your numpad pretty much kind of dedicated for this experiment. So we've got 0 to 9, and then it's being triggered by the star key, and that's similar to the RT stuff, except that that's triggered by the / key. So what we've got here is effectively 10 keys to play with, but we've got different questions, and in this case we've really got 2 main questions. We've got what is your heading and what is the distance, and what state we're in has a relation to what array gets populated when we press a key. So if we're in the heading bool state, if that's true, then any key presses that we're using get recorded in here. And equally, if that is true, distance bool is true, then any key presses get chucked into the distance array here. And then that isn't so much related to a bool state, is more just, that's more of an end state, that's where things end up. This bool here is slightly different. That's not a question, that is more a general kind of state. Is this, if this state is true, then it's going to react to when we press keys. Okay, so if that was false and we press the numpad keys, nothing will happen. If that's true and we press the numpad keys, then the system will say, okay, so I know you want to do something, so what state are you in? Are you in that state or that state? And depending on which state you're in, different arrays get populated. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's that. Then, and we're still in the initialization state at the moment, then we have our kind of trigger key. So I'm using the star key on the numpad, which is key code 55. So this snippet of code here, what I have is a global variable, and then that is equal to this. So what that is we find the display 46. I won't go into that now, but it's basically kind of the game state, the non-map state, I think. Display add event handler. That's the kind of the ArmA command, the trigger that kind of specifies how this should be interpreted. And then we've got two yeah, 2 arguments. I'm not sure if they're arguments technically, but in the array we've got a key down. So there's a key down, key up, there's a few others, but we're just using key downs here. And then there is the what happens if a key is pressed. So if that's happening, then if the key that is pressed is equal to star, then do this stuff. Okay, so if I press star, what happens is I create a local variable, and I put in that local variable a display remove event handler, key down, global variable. Okay, I might come back to that later, but basically what I've struggled with is the management of event handlers, because if you create an event handler and then you restart the mission and then you press that button again, it will trigger twice. If you die and come back, press the same button again, it will trigger 3 times. It's stored in memory, it's not based on your life in game. So what we need to do is to quite explicitly manage the the application and the removal of those display event handlers, and the success of the whole script is really based on that. If that doesn't work, then it's going to break, and it's just going to be crap, basically. So that's quite a key part of any key pressing stroke scripting, for me anyway. To sort of get your head around some of those concepts, I think is quite important, because without the display remove event handler, in this particular context, this is not going to work very well. It'll work once, and then you'll kind of get exponentially more problems down the line. So what we do is, before we do anything, we just make sure that we've removed the key down. I'll come back to that. Then we've got system chat, debug, just telling you it's activated, confirm the heading, and then there's 2 bools that are set to true here. We set the probably this should be the other way around, but it doesn't really matter. We've got the heading bool is true, so that's the question that we're asking. That's what we're interested in right now. This becomes true, this state. And then at the same time, also what becomes true is the numerical input state. So that means that if that's true, and I start pressing keys in on the keypad, then that makes sense to the script. Stuff starts to happen. And then the last 2 things that happen is we trigger a couple of scripts down the line. So there's the key downs, VACF key downs, and the VACF key monitor. And I want to pause the video because it's probably quite a lot to take in. So I'm going to pause it, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to talk you through the next stage here, which is probably the key downs. But yeah, we'll take it step by step.